everyone, and welcome to our monthly meeting of the Sufi Studies Network. I'm Neira Salibegovic, and this month we will be hearing a talk by Dr. Vassilios Adrahtas from Western Sydney University. The talk is entitled Presence-Eschatology, or On the Question of Sufism within the Typology of Islamic Eschatology. So first, a little bit about Dr. Adrahtas. Dr. Adrahtas teaches Islamic Studies at Western Sydney University and Ancient Greek Religion and Myth at the University of Sydney. He holds a PhD in the Sociology of Religion from Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences in Athens, and a PhD in Studies in Religion from the University of Sydney. His specialization is in the political phenomenology of early Christianity, patristics, Byzantine philosophy, the history of religions, and Indigenous Australian studies. He has authored and co-edited more than 10 books. His most recent publications are book chapters such as John Damascene's Reception and Interpretation of the Corpus Areopagitum, Translating Crisis into Logic, John Damascene's iconic conceptualization of history vis-a-vis late Neoplatonic symbolism, Damascenus Neoplatonicus, Suggestions Regarding a Research Agenda for the Study of Neoplatonism in John Damascene's Oeuvre, and articles such as Intellectual Hegemony, Conversion Discourse and Early Christian Apologetic Literature, Islamic Civility and Political Culture, The Feminine in the Poetry of Yunus Emre, a case study in the hierophanic dialectics of mystical Islamic experiences, and lastly, John Damascene's Arguments about the Existence of God, a logico-philosophical and religio-hermeneutic approach. We're really looking forward to your talk today. Dr. Adrahtas, please begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Neira. Good morning to everyone. I suppose we are more or less in the same time zone. As you heard, my topic is will be about basically presence-eschatology, a specific type of eschatology that might be, in a position to address the question of how does Sufism fit into the typology of Islamic eschatology. Now, this topic, is basically a work in progress. It's about my research that has been going on for years now. It relates to things that I have done basically in relation to Christianity, where my PhD in early Christianity is on the political eschatology of Christianity. So that's where the whole interest in eschatology stems from. Secondarily, Jewish Hebrew eschatology comes in, and another strand that more or less informs this interest of mine relates to a problem I'll always have with when approaching Islam, especially when it's about theology, philosophy, conceptual constructs in Islam. And why is that a problem for me? Because on the one hand, Islam is what we are, more or less accustomed to call a monotheism. And on the other hand, all this conceptual framework and apparatus comes from a non-monotheistic tradition, which is the Hellenic. And how do these two things sit together? Possible to have them sitting together. Of course, this is in many respects it's an issue that relates to the tension between Christianity and Hellenism. But we'll look into this as we go on. My approach today is purely phenomenological. I want to stress this because I'm going to be leaving out, the specificities of historiographical, presentation. Now, of course, we are going to lose much stuff this way. Now, on the other hand, I believe that we are going to be compensated, because thanks to phenomenology, we're going to gain something more in terms of exactitude and clarity. So I will start saying very generally that Islam is a hierophanic system. It's not just a religion. And by saying system, I evoke basically a certain scholar, the most prominent, let's say, scholar in the understanding of system theory, Niklas Luhmann. And by saying hierophanic system, I am evoking a whole range of tradition in the history of religions, or the phenomenology of religion, that goes back to Schleiermacher. And of course, through Rudolf Otto, reaches us via Eliade. And of course, it intersects with prominent figures in the purely philosophical phenomenology, like Husserl, or even figures in the logical phenomenology, like Alfred Schutz. Now, if Islam is overarching, overall, and complete order, it's a life order. Not just in the sense of a way of life, but a certain more structured way of life. Of course, it's at the same time a lived experience, a life world. Now, I said before that we tend to regard Islam as a monotheism. Now, this is a overused category, monotheism, polytheism. It's quite, as far as I can say, outdated. It captures certain things, it misses others, because, for instance, it's very easy to understand, that, if Christianity is a monotheism and Islam is a monotheism, we are talking about two very, very different monotheisms. So the category doesn't really capture what the religiosity, the Islamic experience is all about. So I'm going to replace this monotheism, polytheism distinction with another distinction, which I think is more pertinent, more relevant, more indicative, and that's the distinction between a nature-oriented religiosity and a history-oriented religiosity. So there's basically hierophanic systems that either are based, framed, and they are related to nature or to history. Presumably, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and a range of other hierophanic systems belongs to the history-oriented type. And this makes things, I think, much more interesting, and at the same time much more compelling, because, for instance, to recall what I was saying at the beginning, if ancient Greek religion, for instance, or generally the Hellenic worldview, philosophy being part of it, and reflective of it, belongs to a nature-oriented life world, then Islam, as a history-oriented life world, to the extent that interacted with Hellenism, in the case of Falsafa or Kalam or other endeavors as Sufism, then this tension I was talking before becomes quite evident, and it doesn't go away. On the contrary, it is there and becomes even stronger. And it's interesting to see this distinction, because when we say nature-oriented hierophanic systems, we mean nature in a very broad sense. It can be, nature in terms of the cosmos. It can be nature in terms of environment, our immediate environment. Or, for instance, in the case of indigenous Australia, the case there is nature in terms of place, land, the specificity of land and place. Or it can be my nature as myself. So nature is a multi-faceted and multivocal sort of signifier here. And because this sort of nature, especially, in the case of either the universe or creation or the self, nafs, the self, that sort of nature-oriented discourse is embedded within Islam as a history. So things are complicated, although an ontology is always operative within Islam. Now, what's the basic thing about, history-oriented hierophanic system? It's the event, an event. And here I'm using the term in the very pronounced, heightened sense that a French philosopher is using it, Alain Badiou, événement. So amongst a multitude of events, there is one event which is foundational. This foundational event, in a way, informs, determines, frames every other event, everything that follows. So, and what follows basically is an interpretation of that event. So history-oriented hierophanic systems are basically systems, communication systems, very intricate and very sophisticated, as Niklas Luhmann would want them, that involve interpretation. So the foundational hierophanic event, in the case of Islam, that's a prophetic moment. The prophetic event, with the medium, the message, and the messenger, all in one. The medium being the Quran, the messenger being the Prophet Muhammad, and the message being the will of Allah. So all of them in one. But this prophetic moment is then followed by a series of interpretations. Other events, each one of these events is basically an interpretation. Sufism and the tradition we associate with Sufism is one such event or cluster of events. These are not foundational anymore, but fundamental, hermeneutic events. So that's the way I'm treating Sufism in relation to the foundational event of the prophetic moment, as a series of fundamental hermeneutic events. And of course, this is another way to see analytically and let's say epistemologically, another way to see the constant affirmation on the part of Sufis, which is what? That each tariqah, each teaching, each experience of a certain Sufi order goes back to the Prophet. So epistemologically, we can, in a way, translate it the way I did just before. Now, talking about an event, basically we talk about history. And here is where, the phenomenology I'm implementing and employing becomes much more focused on Heidegger. The prominence of historicity in his work, you just have to recall, Sein und Zeit. Being is fundamentally in his thought understood in terms of temporality and historicity by extension. And this has I just want to stress in the case of history, temporality and facticity, the very raw sort of specificity in terms of time. Now, since we are talking about so many German people, it's good to have in mind that, at the end of the day, eschatology in our modern discourse, well, Christian, Islamic, Jewish, you name it, or even secular, all this talk goes back basically to liberal Protestant theology. It's liberal Protestant theology of the 19th century that basically generates all this discussion about eschatology as we understand it, otherwise in a different manner compared to traditional eschatology, which was discourse, talk about the end things, about the afterlife, about that thing there. Now, modern eschatology, since a liberal Protestant theology, is not that thing. It is how that understanding of the end, of the afterlife, affects, involves praxis now. So eschatology is about the present positioning and praxis within history, temporality, actual life, one's life world, okay, in connection, of course, with the future end or afterlife. But it's basically about the present. This is very important. So we have figures like, Johannes Weiss, Albert Schweitzer, Oscar Kuhlmann, who are pioneers in, making this model, consolidating it, and in a way entrenching it into the understanding of our modern discussions about eschatology. And this has gone all over now the spectrum of Christian theology. Nowadays in Christian theology, for instance, it's a very, it's a given, be you a Protestant or a Catholic or an Orthodox, it's, all of them talk about eschatology in those terms. So it's a very ecumenical now thing. Now, the thing is that, talking about eschatology, another issue that has to be carefully taken into consideration is when we talk about the end. Now, the end, okay, is the eschaton. Now, that eschaton is the sacred. It's not just a moment. It's not just a time register, but it is the sacred. Now, in the case of Christianity, the eschaton is the returning Jesus, the glorified Jesus. In the case of Judaism, Jewish eschatology, the eschaton is the triumphant moment of the Messiah. And in the case of Islam, it's the Day of Judgment. The let's say the presenting of Allah as the Day of Judgment. Now, there is Jewish eschatology, as I say, in these terms, and Islamic eschatology. Jewish eschatology is much more about the messianic. It's about futurity. It's about hope. Okay, just recall figures like Ernst Bloch and his the Hope Principle, this famous book of his. So it's more about more future oriented, although doesn't lose the grip of being in the present. In Islamic eschatology, in these terms, the modern terms I'm discussing, I don't think I want someone here to correct me if I'm wrong, in the discussion. I cannot see a very solid or even a potent strand in the literature, the scholarly literature that deals with eschatology in these terms what I'm talking about, not the afterlife, okay, or the end of time in traditional terms. Of course, there are movements, there are schools of thought, basically in Shiite theology, more than in Sunni theology, that have this sort of, propensity towards an eschatology the way I'm discussing it via Christianity and Judaism, due to Mahdi and the more messianic orientation. Of course, always this distinction between the here, the world, the dunya, and the akira, the afterlife, has become nowadays more focused on the dunya. That is how the afterlife relates to this life. So there has been, even in Islam, a more focused and heightened interest here. I just want to add that Jewish eschatology is the first one. For instance, Gershom Scholem comes to mind, that connects the mystical and the historical. because there's lots of things in his work that, connect the mystical to the apocalyptic, to the messianic in terms of, what's happening right now in history. Now, if I were to, describe, let's say, put a name on Islamic eschatology in general, I would say that it is an eschatology in progress. So the experience, the Muslim Islamic experience, is realizing of a domain, okay, of a divine domain, here and now, gradually, slowly, more and more. That's eschatology in progress. Very general, I know. It takes, of course, lots of shapes, lots of forms. It's transmutated here and there. But I think that it never loses this nerve of a progression, a gradual progression that has connotations of, and this is another way to translate, the sense of fate in Islam. It always has a sense of destiny, determination, and destination. So it's an eschatology with these three D's: destination, determination, and destiny. And it is a process, but it's not just a process. It's a process of accomplishment. It's a process of accomplishment. To spell it out the way I want to spell it out, and I don't think that I'm exaggerating, accomplishment of what? Of what? Simply put, accomplishment of what Christianity and Judaism failed to accomplish. That's how Islam comes in. It comes as an eschatological corrective. You guys failed for different reasons. Okay. And now we are taking on the responsibility to fix things in history, in time, to accomplish the divine domain, regime. Now, if Islam is eschatology in progress, Christianity is a very dialectical eschatology. It's a yes and no, yes and no, yes and no. It's torn between the past and the future. The past, the resurrection, the future, which is the parousia, the coming second. Okay, it's always there. The tension, the dialectical tension, is very strong, and that's why, at the end of the day, Christianity, even when, we have phases of consolidation in time, history, politics, society, never felt well with that. Another way to see Christian guilt. Never felt good with this. Now, Jewish Hebrew eschatology is an ambivalent eschatology, because I said it's stressed. It stresses itself towards the future. Sometimes the present comes in, the future takes away all the impetus of the religion, and it's quite ambivalent in that sense. Of course, again, it's needless to say that things are much more complex, much more complicated, much more nuanced and differentiated. Of all, the types that come under eschatology in progress, I'm going to look into only Sufism as presence-eschatology. I'm not going to deal with anything else. Now, again, all of us are accustomed, familiar with a description of Sufism as Islamic mysticism. Again, this is an overused term. It can be a misnomer. It creates problems. But anyhow, there is a sense there that, Sufism is about something, deeper, something more spiritual, something more, something which is not self-evident, not prevalent. You have to really find it. It's hidden. Now, on the other hand, we have, what I have been discussing, Islamic eschatology, which is, the apparent engagement with history, engagement with temporality, and, working out things. So there seems to be a tension here. Now, from the beginning, okay, we are going to say, I'm going to assert that this is let's say, seemingly on a position. There is no Islamic mysticism unengaged from history. Temporality, there is no Islamic mysticism that is not at the same time an eschatology. So, on the one hand, you have something which is more prone to be discussed in terms of theory, via contemplativa, mysticism, and on the other hand, you have something which is more practical, a via activa. One is more metaphysical, ontological. It's a language, it's a discourse. It has a certain conceptualization. And on the other hand, you have a different language conceptualization, which is story-minded, basically. Story. So on the one hand, you have, let's say, definition, and on the other hand, you have a story. So these two are different modes, different discourse, different ways of talking, but at the same, but they are sides of the same coin. The coin is lived Islamic experience. Now, basically, this tension, to be honest, goes back to more or less problems Westerners have in thinking, because it's the categories that the West has introduced in order to understand things that are not West, and that's where the tension and the problem starts. So, and I can even go as far to say that this is goes back to the tension between the Hellenic and the Semitic, but it's a broader thing. Now, Sufism is a single eschatology, although we have different phases in Sufism and different types of Sufism, if we could say subtypes. It is, though, a single eschatology, although it's not, I would say, simple. It's not homogeneous. But it is a single. It's one thing. And it's unified inherently. It has a certain structure, what I would call the paradigm of Sufi eschatology. That paradigm, to use a term from the theory of communications, this paradigm, or literary theory, is oneness. The structure or paradigm of oneness. And this paradigmatic aspect of Sufi eschatology takes on different syntagmatic forms. And in terms of the syntagmatic, Sufism is multiple, but in terms of the paradigmatic, it's one. Now, the first thing that comes to mind, in Sufism, and we have more or less the 5 phases of Sufism. The first phase, which is ascetic Sufism. The second phase, which is, speculative Sufism. The third phase, which is ceremonial Sufism, the Sufism of the Turuk. The fourth phase, which is a traditionalist Sufism throughout the colonial period. With the extended Sufi networks all over the Islamic world. And of course, the fifth phase, the most recent phase, which is, the phase of Neo-Sufism. Now, the first way to conceptualize these subtypes of Sufism in terms of eschatology is to see them vis-a-vis the crisis they are responding to. So ascetic Sufism is basically addressing the crisis of the Umayyad Caliphate, Who are these guys, coming in and corrupting the message and, imposing an empire? Where does this thing come from, the empire? So we have these ascetics, who are safeguarding the eschatological nerve. What we would call safeguarding, the Mecca mentality. Then you have the speculative Sufism, which is, against another crisis, another dynasty, the Abbasid dynasty. Who are these guys coming in and bringing in everything else other than Islam? That, they are sort of Hellenizing us a bit more, and we're going to forget who we are. Stuffing, everything, all sorts of knowledge, into the empire, Now, what happens is that Sufism turns inside, and the eschatological is not just safeguarded, but it's internalized. We have an internalization now of eschatology with the speculative, masters. Then the third phase addresses a third crisis, which is the Mongol, of course, the Mongol, sweeping and catastrophe and fragmentation of the caliphate. And in front of this, disaster and, end of the world, we have the recreation of eschatology as a esotericization, as the creation of a secret space. The tariqah becomes a secret space, a lodge, a brotherhood in terms, of some being part of it. And then we have, the opening up of the Turuk during the fourth phase with traditionalist Sufism, which now addresses a different crisis, which is the crisis of colonialism. And now it's an alternative world order. I mean, if the colonial world order is the dominant, there is a creation of a alternative one. And of course, that the last one, which is the one we are witnessing, Neo-Sufism, addresses the crisis we could call, in terms of religion, the New Age crisis, which is, bringing in, again now, reinventing eschatology in terms of politicizing and apoliticizing. It depends. I mean, if nowadays you are a Chispandilla or a Naqshbandiyya, you are very, very political. But if you are a Western Sufi, new Sufi, a New Age Sufi, you are apolitical. But these are, again, two sides of the same coin. Now, it's very interesting. I think it's very interesting to always have in mind the Gabriel Hadith when you talk about Sufism. Because the Gabriel Hadith gives us a very good indicator, which is, of course, the indicator of Ihsan. And this, I would like to use the term, this flowering. Ihsan is the flowering. Okay, it's the excellence, the perfection, but in terms of, something beautiful, which is the flower. And this, in a very paradoxical way, but not without sort of explanation, is very close to the understanding of certain understandings in Neoplatonism. So this flowering is what Sufism is all about. And this flowering has connotations of awareness, of mindfulness, of deep spirituality, self-consciousness, all these things as such. So Ihsan, to recall the famous passage from the Hadith, from the collection of Muslim, Ihsan is to worship Allah as if you see Him. For if you do not see Him, He surely sees you. Now, the sense that if I read again this Hadith and this specific passage, part of it, it always strikes me as being in the presence of. Sufi is all about being in the presence of. It's about being in the presence. presence in the term in this sort of way, being in the presence of Allah, but also me being in the presence of someone else's presence. So presence is the word, the key word. And we know that. That's why in my summary abstract, I've used the word wujud. Now, and we know that it means, of course, existence, being, but it also means presence. Existence being substance and entity of something, but in which terms? In the terms of its presenting. It's presenting. And it's presenting, and as presenting, it connects to something else that comes with the connotation that comes with the word, which is finding. It's like, if I would dare say, the experience of wujud is like an experience of voila, at last. It's that sort of experience. It's not a Hellenic ontological metaphysical, definition. It's a voila. It's a finally. So it's not about a what. It's about a that, and it's even more about a how. How this that. And of course, it's another way of conceptualizing the famous, pair, Fanai Baka, which is not, something turning into nothing, but it's something otherwise. When two flames become one, do they cease to be? Yes and no. They are otherwise. So it is about being otherwise. Now, unity of wujud, the wadat, this very, very provocative, very, very compelling, and very, very, profound expression of wadat al-wujud. And of course, here comes to my mind at least, and I don't have Milad here. I would have liked to be to be here, because this is where Heidegger comes in. It's like on the one hand you have the Dasein, the nafs, okay, the nafs, which is which is bad. It's your conscious self, but it's also excellent self. It's the yourself finding itself, and realizing it. It's Dasein, thrown there. And through that, within that, the revelation of Zain. So the nafs and Allah work in this sort of, dialectical understanding of presenting. So basically what I'm trying here to do is not to define, but to offer some insights, if they have value as insights, and if they can lead us further into something important, perhaps. So I won't stress anymore the presentatio, the presenting, because that's what I think Sufism was all about. This comes more powerfully through two types of Sufism, which are speculative Sufism and ceremonial Sufism. The Sufism of Baghdad and the Sufism of the Turuk. This Sufism is where this is more evident. However, it's also in the other forms, the other three forms, but less so. Allah cum eschaton is not there and then, is not here and now, but it's about the existentiality that allows these things to construct themselves. as such. Coming out of the experience of presenting, finding, okay, the voila moment of unity, where there's no I, you, there's no me and that. Coming out of that, only after you see it as there and then, or here and now. I would just like to very, because, we're running out of time, and I would like to hear your feedback, of course. I just want to describe and delineate this present eschatology into 5 modes, different according to the phase of Sufism. Now, the first phase, ascetic Sufism, okay, is presence as a constant. It's constant presence. Fighting again and again and again and again and again. Being aware of this, distinctive way to be at the limits of the Islamic world, to make it go further and further. The Ghazi, in the sense of Zud, as detachment, as being special and pure. Now, the second phase, which is Baghdad and contemplative, speculative Sufism, is presence, not as a constant thing, every time thing, but as a momentary, as each time it happens, not every time, each time. It's a momentary presence. And the third phase, which is ceremonial Sufism, Turuk Sufism, is about unity. But it's about unity which is contingent. Might happen. And it will happen unexpectedly during the Sama, the performance. Then we have traditionally Sufism during the colonial period, where presence becomes possible. Within the network, the intricate, complex, complicated network all over the Arabic world, the Muslim world, to be more correct, there, within that network, within that matrix, it is possible to be present. And finally, modern Sufism, fifth type of Sufism, Neo-Sufism, where presence is given. Either given as a capital of the past through tradition, or Neo-Sufism, New Age Sufism, very trendy Sufism, where the given is again based on the legacy, not tradition now, but the legacy, the capital of Islam, and it's oriented towards the future. Whereas in the 3 big traditional Sufi orders, this tradition and givenness is based on the past. So we're talking about different modalities, about the historical temporality, the historical crises, the facticity of history, and engaging and addressing it. I know it's a very big topic. Sorry for perhaps bombarding you with all this. I just had to, get it off me and relate it to people so I can see. I've talked with this many times, not the whole spectrum with Milad, but quite a lot from, during the last 10 years. But I wanted to share with a broader audience. So I see, am I deluding myself, or am I, sort of, getting somewhere? Thank you.